Go.
Hello, today is November 16th. I'm Paul Glumaz with the BC Movers chapter here in Vancouver. My purpose tonight is to give people a sense, first, of what has happened a week ago last Tuesday. Second, a sense as well as to why what happened has happened in terms of what is not visible. And third, to go into the all-out fight over policy that will now begin as a result of what has happened. Okay, and now, to understand what has happened in the United States, but also similarly in other nations of Europe, you have to go back almost 8 years after the inauguration of the President of Hope and Change. Okay, now a lot of people who voted for Trump voted for the President of Hope and Change because they looked at this individual and they said, this is different than Bush. The message is different. The look is different. And they voted for him. And he became president. And we had a feeling that it wasn't going to be all right. But we didn't. We went along with the transition. There was a transition period. And that transition period was hopeful. We had all kinds of indications that things might be different than under Bush Jr. and Dick Cheney. And then what happened was by April of 2009, we saw what was going to be happening, and we saw where this thing was going to go. And we took a very good reading of Obama's personality, as well as who was running him, who was controlling him. And we said, this is going to be very bad. And at that point, we did something very provocative and very disturbing to most people. We put a Hitler mustache on Obama and put the poster out in our literature tables and what have you. And this did not go over very well with a lot of people who believed in hope and change. We had established ourselves with the Democratic Party in previous elections and in previous periods. We had friends in all of the state legislatures and Congress. We had people we talked to. They had a very high regard for us. And they lost that high regard for the Bush movement. We had a youth movement, which was quite significant in 2009. And most of the younger people couldn't deal with the fact that we were now pariahs in the society. We had made ourselves pariahs in the U.S. political establishment. We had gone to the extreme. We had become personas non gratis in the United States. And the people who loved our campaign to get rid of Dick Cheney and our campaign to have hearings once the Congress convened in 2006, or can't remember exactly. They loved our campaign against the neocons and against the policies of the Republican government of George Bush, economic policies. Could not fathom and could not understand what had happened to us. We had fallen off the globe in their mind. We had gone stark raving mad. And as a result, I was out on the streets with the mustache sign. And people were not happy with us. And people that I knew, people in the Democratic Party that I worked with were just like, they couldn't believe we were doing this. And we told them why we were doing it. We told them what Obama was. We told them how he intended to use Obamacare to start culling the elderly and so forth and so on, and letting the insurance companies rich everybody up. We told them he was going to expand the wars. We told them who we worked for, and they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it. Oh, no, he's only doing what he's being told by the military-industrial complex. They couldn't see that he, as president, was what he was. And so it got worse because as people began to see that we were right, they got more hysterical towards us, especially in the Democratic and the more liberal areas of the country. And then in 2010, a year later, Keisha Rogers of Texas ran as a congressional candidate in a Democratic congressional primary as a Democrat with the Impeach Obama program and all the other positive programs that we had. And it was a Republican, primarily Republican congressional district, but it had a decent amount of Democrats. And she had opponents in the Democratic Party who were running, and she won the primary. Wow. And that caused a lot of people to get very upset, because she won the primary because increasingly people were starting to get a picture of what Obama was doing. And then in 2011, we had the whole fight around Glass-Steagall in the Congress. And Obama lied and said, we're doing Glass-Steagall. No, you're turning the whole financial system over to the international banks. And they can bail in. We fought, and we had congressmen and senators that were working with us, and they were lied to. They were lied to. And they were threatened. Their lives were threatened. But we continued to campaign for Glass-Steagall. And all the while, during this period, we became known as the dogmatic Glass-Steagall people and fighting Wall Street and Obama. And a lot of the people in Congress, especially the senators, said we can't touch it. We can't touch it. We don't have support. So we went to the state legislatures, and half the state legislatures passed resolutions in favor of Glass-Steagall. So we established ourselves as the Glass-Steagall people. And elements of the Democratic Party once again started working with us, but they were still freaked out about the mustache. They were still very upset about the mustache. Then at the end of in September of 2011, you had, actually later, it was 2012. Was Benghazi 2012 or 2011? 2011.
No, 12.
12, okay. So in 2012, in 2010, Keisha ran again. This time, the Democratic Party mobilized to stop her from getting the nomination, and she won by a few votes with a full Democratic Party mobilization. So the Democratic Party was starting to get the feeling that they were not as loved as they were before. And then in the 2012 election in Texas, Keisha ran for U.S. Senate in the Democratic primaries, and she made it into the runoff. And they mobilized everything they had to defeat her in the runoff, which they did. So, and then the 2012 election was Romney had a potential to challenge Obama on Benghazi, and he backed down. Now, by 2013, the population in the hinterlands and in the suburbs and the working class populations, they had reached a point where they were getting very angry. People's children were coming back from Afghanistan, from Iraq, time and time again. People were being broken. The word was getting out that in that layer that Obama was backing the Islamic, fundamental Islamic terrorists, and things started to shift. So things reached a certain boil around 2013 going into 2014. We would go out in the street. Now the mustache sign was very popular. Everywhere we went, whether you were, but not in the well-educated urban areas where people were better off, but in the suburbs and in the there's an older guy who punched out one of our people because of the mustache sign, saying that, you know, he's from, you know, he's Jewish and he was from Eastern Europe. And the media made a big case about this guy, older guy, punching a woman out and supporting him in doing this. But by now, he was coming up to our table saying, I agree with you now. I see what you were saying. I'm sorry I punched you guys. I'm sorry I did that. I apologize. But now I see what you're saying. Now I understand what you're saying. Okay. So now, as we go into the 2014 election, and this is very important, and I was out in the streets, I was out in the hinterlands, I was out in the suburbs, okay? The Republican Party decided to organize victory in the House and Senate. And in all their fundraising operations, they promised the population that they would take care of the issue of Obama. They would have hearings and so forth and so on. They would get to the root of the criminality and around Benghazi and so forth and so on. And they managed to win enough seats to go into the Senate and the House. But the reason they were able to do that was they went after Obama.
Yeah.
So what happened in the street is everybody kept telling us, no, the Republicans are going to do it. We don't need you anymore. You know, fine. You know, we don't need you. We're going with the Republicans. We're going with the Republicans. These are Democrats. A lot of them are Democrats. Well, the Republicans went into the Congress in 2015, and they became the closest allies of Obama. The primary opposition to Obama shifted primarily to Democrats, progressive Democrats and other Democrats. So now the people voted the Republicans in to stop Obama, but now their very party and the people that they supported are now the closest allies of Obama. And what happened was the entire Republican Party self-destructed at that point. Completely self-destructed. You had the Tea Party, you had the religious people fighting the physical conservatives, you had the moderates, the physical conservatives, the Tea Party people, and the libertarians. So you had the libertarians, the Tea Party people, the religious fanatics, and the austerity people. And then there was a few moderates, middle of the street, and the whole Republican Party. I saw it self-destruct. Why? Because none of them would challenge Obama. None of them would challenge Obama. They self-destructed. And that was the condition that opened the door for Trump. Trump went in and walked all over the Republican Party. Everyone expected Jeb Bush to become the nominee. And he just got crushed. Everybody got crushed. Why? Because they had demonstrated that they were the same thing as Obama. They had demonstrated that to the population. And Trump was whatever he told you he was, right? Because he had no record of being anything other than whatever he told you he was, and whatever he told you he was could change. You know, so then what happened is that there were two other candidates other than Hillary. Hillary was going to be the anointed one. You had Martin O'Malley, who was working with people inside the Democratic Party, who were committed to Glass-Steagall. They were very serious about it. They were committed to Glass-Steagall, and then you had Bernie Sanders from the outside. You had an insider, Martin O'Malley, and then you had an outsider, Bernie Sanders. And the media, the way they structured it, the games they played, the way they used the Democratic Party, the way they, all of the games that they used, they kept these people from being able to be relevant in the campaign. Bernie Sanders created a large following of people that were disenfranchised, progressives who were disenfranchised. So his campaign was a reflection of the failure of Obama. But he himself did not go all the way and take on Obama directly. But it was the hatred for those policies that made him but he and Hillary became one campaign, essentially. And Obama used the power that he had as president, combined with the Democratic National Committee, to control the whole process. To control the whole process. So Hillary gets the nomination, and Trump has got the nomination, and the Republican Party almost went and cut him out completely and force him to run as a third party, but they didn't. They chickened out. Why? Because they didn't have the support in the population. So Trump emerged as the most unlikely choice possible, running an unlikely campaign, and the Clinton crowd, the Obama-Hillary crowd, decided to crush him by going after him and going to the lowest common denominator. Largely because the policies that they were following were not the policies that were supported by the population. War and Wall Street. By now, Wall Street had become a dirty word to the average person in the United States, as all these wars. So they went after. So they went after Trump for his whatever they could go after him on, and they just made themselves look silly and stupid. And not only that, Bill Clinton personally had a scream. It's reported by the guy who wrote Blood Feud, Klein, that Bill Clinton had a screaming match with Hillary because she was abandoning the working class in the Rust Belt and so forth. And he got iced out of the campaign. So this campaign became a referendum for war and imposing a Wall Street financial dictatorship even further than it already was on the population. That's what the campaign became. And that had profound effects internationally, and international forces began to try to work operations to try to make very clear what the situation was. And you had this vast number of people in the electorate who couldn't stand Hillary and couldn't stand Trump. They couldn't stand Hillary and they couldn't stand Trump. And I know this for a fact. There were Bernie Sanders supporters. They couldn't stand Hillary. They couldn't stand Trump. There were all these other supporters. Who do I vote for? Do I vote for nobody? Do I vote for a third party? Do I vote for Trump? And the Clinton people, the machine, the Obama machine, they had the entire media with them. They had all the corporations with them. They had
Hollywood. All the movie stars with them? Lots of them?
They had everything going for them. And the money and everything. And the population reached a certain point. Now, at the end of the campaign, Trump did not do well in these debates. He did not do well. He was undisciplined. He got uncontrolled a little bit. And what happened was that the last 2 weeks of the campaign, last 3 weeks of the campaign, he brought out the issues that LaRouche had been making from the beginning. Glass-Steagall supported that, said he was going to do that. Revive the space program, he was going to do that, and he was going to stop the drive for war. And he made it very explicit. And I think that and everything else combined to shift the vote at the last moment of those people who could not figure out who to vote for, shifted at the last moment, and he won the election. And the shock that this has caused inside the United States, inside Canada, inside the rest of the world is unbelievable. There's like a shock effect that this is caused. Because Trump is president of, that guy is president of the United States. My God, what's going on in the United States that this happened? And, oh, everybody wants to say he's a racist and that's why it happened, or the FBI went after Hillary, that's why it happened. None of that. I'm telling you that this was something that was building for 8 years, not something that happened today or happened because of this or that. But besides the fact that Trump is from New York, and he was a supporter of the single payer for health care. He contributed a lot to the Clinton Foundation. Of course, he contributed to probably a lot of other people. He was not on bad terms with the Clintons. And I think he is surprised that he's,
Yes.
that he's,
He looked shocked.
He looked shocked. He came out, he looked like more
Oh my God.
dumbfounded than anyone.
yeah. So I think he's surprised that that he won the election. And now, the man he has appointed to be his chief of staff, this guy Bannon, who took over his campaign in August. This guy, we believe, was instrumental in the final part of the campaign, bringing in the space program, Glass-Steagall, and the war situation.
Bannon?
Bannon, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now he's portrayed as this super right-wing conservative nut job, but actually, our analysis is that he is a very conservative Catholic and very anti-Wall Street and the City of London, because he believes that greed promoted by the system has completely destroyed Christianity. So that's his view. He gave a speech on that in 2014 at a conference. Now he's not, I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but the point is he's an independent voice. He's not,
As bad as.
you can put a label on him if you want, you can say he's this and that and link him to this and that, but he is an independent person in that sense. He's not somebody, he actually is intelligent and he's independent. What this means, there's another aspect of it, which is the anti-Muslim thing that he's connected to, which is going to be a problem, and so forth and so on. Okay. The other guy that Trump has appointed National Security Advisor is also very intelligent, but he also has this anti-Muslim problem, and he is Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. He's the one who went on RT and went on, now this is the guy that went on RT. He was a former head of Defense Intelligence. He went on RT, he went to Press TV of Iran, and basically said, I, as a member of the defense, I as head of Defense Intelligence can tell you for a fact that Obama is supporting the terrorists in Syria and so forth and so on. He did that.
He was actually in Moscow, sitting next to Putin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's going to be the National Security Advisor. Can you imagine that? I mean, this is like totally outside the Beltway. Okay. Another very independent guy from Alabama, a Senator Sessions, is being chosen to be this the Attorney General. He's completely outside of this circle. Another guy is being chosen to be head of the CIA. And he's another guy who's completely outside of this grouping that has run this thing. So you have people coming in who have no control, they have no control over. They're not, you don't know what they're going to do. Okay. Now,
Secretary of State?
huh?
Who's Secretary of State?
Nobody.
They haven't picked it yet, but it might be
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney.
Yeah, he went up for interview with.
I wouldn't like him in that position, but whatever.
But yeah, maybe he'll overcome being a Mormon by
There are worse
meeting
names
with other
on the
people
list.
in other
Yeah,
countries.
yeah.
Bolton would be a
Yeah,
disaster.
yes.
Yeah. So anyhow, so why would anyone want Trump as president? No, nobody wanted Trump as president, but they went ahead and voted for him because of Hillary. and Obama. And because they were not running a presidential race. Hillary was not running a presidential race. She was running for the chief warlord, basically.
Yeah.
That's what she was running for. She wasn't running for president of the United States. She wasn't going to the people and giving them any hope. She went to West Virginia and told the people there that she was going to shut down all the coal mines. Can you imagine that? We're going to shove it down your throat, and I'm going to be the president, and you're going to do what we tell you. You know, and that was our attitude. Okay, so this was what it was. It was to finish the job on the American people, as far as I'm concerned. And how did they deal with Trump? They just demonized him in every possible way they could. And demonized him and ridiculed him and demonized him and ridiculed him. And that was part of it. And it got so bad that they were accusing him of being an agent of Vladimir Putin.
They still are. They're still trying to do that.
I know. Now look at it from Russia's point of view. Now let's look at it from Russia's point of view. Here's Obama and Hillary going for war. Now Russia has a capability of knowing what's going on through their intelligence services. And Hillary is campaigning for war. And the Russians are wondering where in the U.S. population is there any resistance to this very serious problem. Well, they just saw that the U.S. population is not necessarily as bad as they thought they were from their standpoint, that they rejected war. Because usually what happens when they do the, you know, you're not tough, you're not standing up to the communists, you know, then everybody backs down and does it. Trump didn't do that. He said, I'm going to work with Putin. Well, you're going to work with Putin? Oh, NATO, we don't need NATO. What's NATO good for?
Did he actually say that?
Oh, you're
Yes,
saying
he
something. Now he could say that.
Yeah.
Because he says a lot of things, right?
He also said that the Hillary and Obama caused the war and refugees and
Yeah.
he said the way it is.
He said all that. So basically, what are they going to do? So what do? They did the traditional American routine. Oh, you're not standing tough. Oh, you're an agent. Oh, you're connected to Putin. Putin is bad. Putin is evil. Putin is the enemy. Putin is this. He's aggressive. We have to. And you know, people. I would hear people tell me that all day long, right? And he didn't buy it. He didn't go with it. He didn't crawl. He didn't crawl and say, you didn't do that. So what happened? It didn't work. This is the first time since the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover and Truman that crap hasn't worked on the American population. This is the first time in almost 70 years that this crap hasn't, or 60 years, this crap has not worked on the American people. We gotta stop communism. We gotta go to Vietnam. It's domino time. We gotta stop Putin. He's coming back. He's threatening us. And on and on and on. And the whole media just went with this day in and day out, demonizing Putin. And Putin was smart. He tried to minimize the playing into that. And what happened? It didn't work. It didn't win the election. Oh, these emails got for the Democratic Party about how they treated Bernie Sanders. Oh, they were leaked by the Russians, right?
Yes.
So how does Trump respond to that? Oh, well, the Russians should release the 30,000 emails that Hillary had.
Russia, if you're listening, can you release?
Yeah, can you at least, if you're listening, can you at least release the other email? You know, and people are going, right. And then the head of her campaign, John Podesta, said, he said this. That proves he's an agent of Putin. Totally, he baited them. And this went on and on and on and on. And so people, because the population could see that he wasn't gonna, he might be crazy, but he wasn't gonna capitulate to this kind of control, this kind of social control. So, now, I have, now Trump, the reality of Trump winning has not been accepted
No.
by the Democratic Party. They still don't believe it happened, and they believe that that it should be overturned.
Yeah.
So you have a movement in the U.S. to create opposition demonstrations, and they're going to try. There's people going to try to deny him the election based on the fact that he was 500,000 votes short of the majority, and that Hillary had the majority. He got the electoral college. So there's this whole campaign going on because these people can't accept the fact that Trump is.
It's called Purple Revolution.
Huh?
It's called Purple Revolution.
Yes, it is.
They say that Hillary was wearing purple color and Bill Clinton is wearing purple tie, so they named it. And they say they're mobilizing people.
Right. So they're mobilizing people to overturn the election results. Now, I'm not going to get into that, but I want to get into the psychology behind it. Because if these people accept a Trump victory, then it means their entire worldview is crushed. And they have to accept that. And they have to realize that what has happened to them. Now, how did Obama deal with the opposition during the period of the growing opposition to his continuation of the Bush policies, and even worse? He did it by emphasizing something we call identity politics. Identify with blacks, identify with gays, identify with transsexuals, identify with this, and this whole campaign of identifying the working class are stupid, they're racist,
Deplorable.
they're deplorables, right, et cetera, et cetera. So he created not him, but not just him, but they created this mindset in the areas where people didn't have children, where they had good jobs, where they lived in the cities and apartments, and all over the country. They created this ambiance, this environment that was completely disconnected from the reality of what was going on. So you had a portion of the population that were doing better, including the rich, that were disconnected from the actual reality of what was going on in the rest of the United States. There were these pockets of prosperity, like Seattle, San Francisco, New York, some other places, and this is what they created. They created this surreality, and so I'm going to go through two anecdotes of my experience on election day, and then my experience on last Thursday. On election day, in Seattle, the way it works in the state of Washington is that the party organizations are based on state legislative districts, just like 48 state legislative districts in all of Washington state. And I happen to be in one of them, and I happen to be a precinct committee chairman in this one district. So I was invited to the Christmas party, no. I was invited to the coronation party for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And it was a combination party of two districts. One district was outside of Seattle, and one district was in Seattle. And the district outside of Seattle had a leader in it that was we worked with on Glass-Steagall, who was a bit of a maverick. And the district I was in was run by a machine. So I showed up at the party, and everybody, this huge TV screen, and people are staring at the TV screen. There's a whole bunch of people just staring at the TV screen going. They're in a state of shock. And I go up to this woman, and I say, "How's it going?" How do you think this happened? I'm going to kill. misogynist. She's about 45.
He's a racist, he's a
Yeah, and I just looked at her face, and then I looked over further away. There were other people that seemed happy, and I'm going, why are they happy? And these are Democrats. So it turns out I got to talk to the woman who was the state senator from that other district, and her daughter is the party chairman for that district, and they brought in the band and they started dancing. And they said, we're gonna dance tonight. We're gonna have fun tonight. And I'm going, that doesn't make any sense. So I go up to Marilyn Chase, and Marilyn Chase is her name. And I'm talking to her. I says, I said to her, Hillary did this to herself. And, you bet she did. You can't treat the working population of the United States like that and expect them to love you. No way. So she was obviously a Bernie Sanders supporter, okay. And her daughter and the people from that district were dancing, and these other people were like, were like this, staring at the thing. So.
Did you see CNN? Did you see CNN? They couldn't believe it, and they wouldn't call Florida for Trump until it was 99%.
Yeah, and they still don't believe it.
They still don't believe it.
So anyhow, so then one of these women wanted me to dance with her, and I said to her, do you think Trump's a Republican? She said, hell no. He ran the biggest con job on the Republicans anyone's ever run in the history of mankind. Hey, let's party. She said, do you believe he's for abortion? And I said, I don't know. I said, she's not for abortion. He just ran a con game. I mean, and you believe it's against abortion. Well, he's for, repealing all the laws and everything.
Right, yeah.
He just ran a con job. So she was my age, and she was smart, and I think she knew what she was talking about. So anyhow, so that was one anecdote. Now the second anecdote is, then these districts have monthly meetings where the members and the PCO and they all come and they talk and events. And so I didn't live in her district, but two of our people do, and they went to this to the one on Wednesday night, which was this woman's district, and somebody from the party came to talk to them about how we have to now go out and get people and do all this stuff, and it turned into a big debate over what happened, and which didn't get resolved, but it was at least a debate. So on Thursday, I went to my district meeting, and there's a lot of people there. There's about over 100 people there. And they had food out because they wanted people to come. And they don't usually do that. And I'm sitting in the audience, and then we have this supercomputer nerd as a district chair. And you don't know if he's a robot or a person. And he wears the weirdest clothing that I've ever seen in my entire life. I wish I'd taken pictures of his clothing over the time I've been going there, because he has to go to a special place to get this strange clothing with strange colors, totally unique, totally, and he always wears a hat, and it's totally bizarre. And he's the chairman of the state party, and he doesn't say anything except when when I talk to him, he's like, he won't he'll just answer like a computer. So anyhow, but they lined up 5 panelists to discuss the election, right? And the audience is there to discuss the election. And they controlled it completely. Because you had to listen to the 5 panelists spend 5-10 minutes each. And then every question they got to answer, all of them got to answer. And basically what they were saying was, look, we did fantastic in our district. It was great. You're a bunch of great people. You're wonderful. We got more votes for Hillary than we got for Obama in the last election, and this are the figures, and on and on and on. But, those other people didn't understand. They didn't quite understand who they were voting for in the other districts, and so forth and so on, and blah, blah, blah. And they showed a map of how wonderful it was, and then we had these other parts where the people were poorer and not as well educated, and so on and so forth. So they did all of that. And then the other woman said, well, you know, I am organizing a political action committee of women under, millennial women to become state legislators, and we need to have black lesbians in the state legislature.
LGBT.
Yeah, right. And, oh, how wonderful it is, and everybody's clapping. And then on it goes, right? And then I'm getting like, there's no way you can have a discussion. It's all control, it's totally controlled. So then one woman in the audience got called upon and she says, I am canceling all my contributions that I've been making over the years to the Democratic State Party. Because we're in a blue state, massive Democrats, and how come we got a Republican controlled House and State Senate? Why is that? And then the party apparatus said, well, you know, this happened and that happened, and you know, so and so got sick, and you know, blah 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 blah. It's close. It's close. It's actually a close. It's almost parity. But there should be no way the Republicans could control both the state Senate and the House, right?
In Washington.
In Washington State, yeah. There's no way. It's a Democratic state. It's always been a Democratic state. And so she attacked the party. So the party went on and on and on about we're going to change that next time and blah, 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 blah. And this went on and on and on. And it got worse. And they kept saying, well, we got to go out to those people. You got to go out to those people. But those people don't want to talk to you if you're going to talk to them the way you're talking here. Right? So anyhow, so this went on. And I got disgusted. I walked out. Then I said, no, you have to say something. I came back. I got disgusted again and walked out, drove around, and then came back. As I came back, it was ending. And then in my loud, very loud voice, I said, I have something to say. Donald Trump did not win this election. Hillary lost it because she went with Bush-Obama program of war and supporting Wall Street against the people of this country.
You said it much louder than that, Paul.
Yeah. I said it very loud. And everybody heard me. And then I said, you are in denial about reality. Well, I looked around to various people, and I looked at them and I went like this, and they went like that. And I went to that person and I went like that. And I went to that person and they went like that. Okay. And so I went up to talk to the speakers, and it was over. The meeting was over. The meeting was over. And all of a sudden, it so happens that the chairman for the entire state of the Democratic Party, the actual guy in charge of the entire state Democratic Party, was at this meeting. He says, hold on, I got something to say. I got to come up. So he comes up to the podium, and he says, let's all take a deep breath. Let's all take a deep breath. I know there are emotions. We need to calm down. and everybody's looking at him like, you know, I mean. So anyhow, that was my Democratic Party. It's a different than the other one, but that was my experience with the Democratic Party. So anyhow, they have not accepted this, and you're saying. The media saying it was the FBI that caused it to happen, and they're trying to make up all these things. So this is very important. The denial is extremely strong right now.
Now they're saying social media is doing that.
Yeah.
Social.
Yeah, so they're trying.
Google did it.
Yeah.
And Google was actually supporting Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
I myself sometimes look for some negative news, and they would say this site is not available. You wouldn't get it. They were working for Hillary. So but they're blaming now Google.
So anyhow.
You're blaming social media.
Same with FBI.
Now,
Or Hillary's left hand.
this our crowd, our values crowd, I call them our values. We have our values. We believe in freedom. We believe in the right to smoke pot. We believe in the right to take drugs. We believe in the right to be whatever sex you want to be. We believe in this, we believe in that. We believe in tolerance, right? We believe in all this stuff. All of that has nothing to do with the financial system. It has nothing to do with the bellicosity of the U.S. military under Obama. It has nothing to do with the future economic. It's totally identity politics.
Absolutely.
Huh?
Absolutely, the worst kind of politics.
And these people, this is our values. And I heard Angela Merkel say, we're against Putin because he doesn't have our values. Now, what values do these people have? This is degeneracy. And the population of the world is not degenerate as they are. The population of the United States may be stupid, may be deplorables, maybe whatever, but they're not as degenerate as they are as that. They want to have children, they want to raise families, they want to have a future. They're not oriented towards this kind of culture, which requires also a certain type of money. And what's happening to their kids, you know, the epidemic, Obama has allowed the opiate manufacturers to flood the country with illegal opium, prescription opium, and it's just, you know, fentanyl, you all know about that. All of this stuff is happening, it's expanding massively, and Obama's help, you know, Obama went along with all that. And people have reached a certain point where they want something to happen. So these people are completely disconnected from that, and when you explain it to them, well, yeah, it's not right, yeah, I agree with you, but you know, it's that kind of thing. So this is a shock. But they are not in charge of the universe anymore. These people are not in charge of the universe anymore. The world has changed. And this election is not that the United States has changed, it's that we have now created a situation. The situation is now open for a real fight over policy. Now, what does this mean for Canada? Okay. My reading and some discussions I've had with people is that the entire internal Canadian political structure is in a state of shock. Especially in the Liberal Party, which is the governing party. They are in a state of shock. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to deal with this. So they're going to take a wait-and-see attitude. And now there are demonstrations in Vancouver, there's this, there's that. Trump is being presented as whatever they're presenting him as. But the Canadian political establishment is what I'm talking about. They are in a state of shock. Trump has said he's going to get rid of NAFTA. And, but there's a different free trade thing going on right now coming out of China. So that's a whole different thing. So there's this kind of thing going on. So there is a
They're not, the APEC, they were talking at the APEC, Canada and the other countries, they say they're going ahead with transatlantic partnership without USA.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. But okay, yeah. So, but how are they going to deal with the United States at this point? The United States isn't going to go along with may not go along with all this stuff. May not go along with all this stuff. So that's going to be very interesting. We don't know how that's going to work. And that's partly why our conferences are so important, because we're giving conception of how Canadians can prosper in the new situation. Okay. So, okay.
Oh, can I just add something?
Yeah.
To that? We're just something to keep in mind, and I've only discovered this through some local activity that I've been doing in my area, Pitt Meadows. And I've been the mayors and MLAs in Canada are not part of an apparatus like the Democratic and Republican parties. They are, I mean, they're part of, you know, they're liberal or conservative, whatever, but they are directly affected by all the problems on the street. The people, you know, the taxpayers, the mortgage holders, the citizens, the people who use the public parks. And they are greatly being affected right now by all the drugs. They're being inundated, actually, with harm reduction policies that are being put on them forcefully by the federal and provincial governments. They're not being consulted. They're not being even asked. They're just being told. And so we're finding that there's a great revolt in these layers. And what Paul was talking about with this whole Hillary psychology of this crowd, of the LGTB and all of that, it's not that any of that, this is just me speaking, is bad in and of itself. The problem is that that's all they're talking about, and it has nothing to do with the problems that are actually affecting everybody, like the drugs on the street, like no jobs, like the economy, like the crumbling infrastructure. All of those things are creating the culture that the Liberals are now raising up as the thing to, you know, glorify. But so we're finding the same problems in Canada. It's just, it's manifesting a little bit differently. So don't kid yourself. Like, Canada is in a crisis because just like the suicides and the drug overdoses are really going up. They're going up dramatically in the United States, but the reporting is not in relation to the numbers. And the same problems are happening in Canada. So there is, despite all the rhetoric, despite, you know, the global CBC, CTV coverage and the loudest voices, there is a segment in Canada that is going to respond as well, because they're facing the same problems. This problem of not addressing the reality is something that the loudest activists in Vancouver and elsewhere in Canada are also saying, but again, it's disconnected. We're seeing a lot of green activism around stopping the pipeline, white male privilege, and, you know, all of these things. What does that have to do with the economy? Nothing. What does that have to do with infrastructure? Nothing. So, I just want to draw the correlation to what's happening here.
Now, internationally, what's happened in the United States is having an even bigger earthquake, because it represents a global revolution from the bottom being reflected. If not perfect, it's not being reflected with perfect people, but it's being reflected. Brexit was the first one. This is the second one. And it's seen that way. And the next one's going to be in Italy in 2.5 weeks, where Renzi is trying to establish control over Italy through a referendum. He wants to be the Gucci Mussolini, and the population has had it, and they're probably going to vote it down, and it's going to be seen as like equivalent of a Brexit. So you have the population in Great Britain, you have Jeremy Corbyn on one end, and then you have Nigel Farage on the other end. But they're all opposing the existing order. So you have this all over the world, and this is happening in Europe. The man who's expected to win the Austrian elections, the rerun of the Austrian elections, is one of these people as well. And he's now talking about bringing Putin and Trump together, this Austrian leader. You had a shift in Moldova, a shift in Bulgaria, a shift in Georgia, away from this whole our values business, and And now you have China going into Ukraine, you have China going into Latvia and offering economic deals, and so forth and so on. So you have all this happening. It's just massive. Now, what I want to go through is that all of Canada's policies are going to have to be reevaluated. They're going to have to rethink the whole thing. Because if Russia and China and the U.S. get together and work together, and China and Canada is in between them from a geographical standpoint, and they want to, and part of what they want to do is build the tunnel and the infrastructure to connect up Eurasia with North America. What's Canada going to do? They're going to say no to Russia, China, and the United States. Say no, we don't want you. We don't want it. Stay away. That's interesting. That's an interesting question. Anyhow, now, so let me go into the actual reality. So we have essentially 2 months before the inauguration, if indeed Trump gets inaugurated. Those 2 months, what you have to do is establish what has to happen internationally is that the policy that's coming out of China and Russia from an economic standpoint has to become so overwhelming within those 2 months that it's a fait accompli. That is, it's something that you can't stop, it's done. You either work with it or you suffer, lack of economic development. So that's very important. I say that's very important because once Trump is inaugurated, it's not clear that he understands economics sufficiently to do the right thing. It's very clear that he doesn't. So you want to have this going on. Now let me go into that a little bit because Helga was the keynote address to the Peruvian College of Economists. And this was broadcast all over Peru in a day or two before the APEC summit. And she laid out what has happened in the last 3 years. Now, mind you, this was announced 3 years ago by Xi Jinping, the One Belt, One Road. And in that time, I'm going to read from her speech, part of her speech. Since President Xi Jinping announced this in Kazakhstan in September 2013, there was an exponential explosion of economic activity. And already now, this whole project is 12 times larger than the Marshall Plan, which reconstructed Europe in the post-war period. It already involves 4.4 billion people, the majority of mankind. It involves more than 100 nations and large organizations. And just to give you an enormity of what has happened in these 3 years, I want to give you a short overview of the different projects which are near completion or underway. There are presently 6 large land routes being constructed. This is the belt and the One Belt, One Road conception of the Chinese. Most of them are in different degrees of completion. You have the Eurasian land bridge connecting China, Kazakhstan, Russia to Europe. Then you have different corridors, one going from China to Mongolia to Russia, a second one from China to Central Asia to West Asia. A third one is the corridor between China and Pakistan, which China has invested 46 billion in alone. The fourth, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar, and the fifth, from China to Indochina. And then you have, in addition to that, the so-called 21st century maritime Silk Road, which refers to the road in the One Belt, One Road. From Chinese ports, this maritime Silk Road goes to the South China Sea, to the Indian Ocean, to Europe, a second route from China through the South China Sea to the South Pacific. And all of these projects are based on win-win cooperation with the idea not only China profits from them, but all participating countries equally. And Xi Jinping made this really his personal project. And if you look at how many personal travels he conducted since the 3 years, he went to 37 countries on state visits, 18 in Asia, 9 in Europe, 3 in Africa, 4 in Latin America, and 3 in Oceania. He made 3 trade agreements with 11 states along the One Belt, One Road. He made bilateral agreements with 56 states. He made joint memorandums of understanding for planning operations with scores of regional organizations such as the European Union, the Central and Eastern European countries, the Mekong neighboring states, the African Union, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Eurasian Economic Union, ASEAN, Asia-Europe meeting. So this is developing into a very integrated network of projects. Part of this are transport lines, which represent, and so forth. As of mid-2016, 39 cargo routes have developed from China to Europe, bringing trains every week. It involves the activities of many Chinese state corporations, it involves 39 large infrastructure projects in 26 countries. It involves new transportation grids through landlocked areas which were completely unreachable before. It involves the upgrading of ports and the modernization of existing infrastructure. The Chinese part of the Silk Road, China built by middle of the year, 98 new airports. This is the Chinese component. And 220,000 kilometers of fast rail. And by 2020, they want to have 50,000 kilometers of fast rail inside China, connecting every major city. Okay, then they have all these telecom companies they've created, which are now growing very fast. An explosion of trade. The trade volume increased $3.1 trillion. There are $51 billion direct investment in these countries. China has reached 5 economic special zones. Okay. By mid-2016, China had an agreement for altogether 52 economic special zones in 18 countries along the One Belt, One Road. 3 of them are already fully operational. The industrial park between China and Belarus, second one between Thailand and China, and Rayong industrial zone, and the third one, Indonesia-China integrated industrial parks. The other ones are in different degrees of realization, as the industrial parks of Cambodia, Vietnam, Pakistan, Zambia, Egypt, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Hungary, and the 4 such zones in Russia. And on it goes. To finance all of this, China also initiated, together with the BRICS nations, a completely alternative financial system, responding to the fact that in the last decades the IMF and the World Bank had betrayed criminal negligent funding infrastructure to the developing countries, leading to the absolute underdevelopment of subcontinents as Latin America or Africa or large parts of Asia. China remedied this by creating the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in 2015, which immediately, despite massive pressure from Washington not to go, so had 57 founding members, including Great Britain, Germany, New Zealand, Canada, not quite Canada. Very strong allies. This bank has 100 billion funding capital. That in addition, the BRICS countries created the new development bank, 100 billion. In December, the Chinese created the new Silk Road Fund, 40 billion. The Maritime Silk Road, another 40 billion. And the gist of the largest part of this financing still comes from the state banks, such as the China Development Bank, which is involved in more than 900 projects for transport, energy, raw materials in 60 countries. Then the China Export-Import Bank, which is involved in more than 1,000 projects, roads, rails, ports, power plants, communications, industrial parks in 49 countries. Then the China Export Credit Insurance Company supports investments totaling 2.3 trillion. These are insurance companies in medium, long-term projects in high-tech areas, in machine building and so forth. Okay. And then they have the Contingent Reserve Fund and so forth. Now, this is all in 3 years. Okay? This is the battle. And this is going to go forward very fast. And the Chinese are doing this, and it's taking over the world. And now British Columbia has benefited from this growth in the last few years, believe it or not. British Columbia now only does 60% of its trade with the United States, as opposed to Ontario, which is 80% of its trade. Its increase of economic activity of British Columbia, which is a 3% GDP growth rate last year, this year or last year, is a result of China, not so much China, just China investment, but also China trade with China. Lumber trade has gone up 3 times with China. British Columbia is now the gateway city for Guangdong province, right? They're mutually great gateway cities for the One Belt, One Road. So China and British Columbia have developed this relationship as a quasi-sovereign province, and so this is affecting British Columbia. British Columbian economy is better off right now than the other parts of Canada because of the Chinese situation.
And to that point, Paul, BC and Western Canada are going to be key and crux in the development that China's proposing. And that one of the things that us people as a group have to do is put forward the concept, and we're going to be fighting the green movement here, the entrenched green movement. We're going to be fighting the native issue, which I'm quite familiar with. So in lieu of that, we're putting together a strategic intelligence report and put that in some of the right people's hands so they can better understand the situation that we're dealing with here. This province is going to be key to all of these projects that Paul's talking about, in terms of resource, in terms of energy, in terms of north-south trade, in terms of east-west trade. This province is going to be key. This is going to be the battleground that's going to be fought, the major battleground we're going to fight with the Greens on, and the Indigenous First Nations people whom we have to bring on side, and many other groups. This should be our thrust. This should be our job, part of this group's job. So you all need to think about that, about how key this area is going to be.
So this is the distinction between the our values crowd and this two different sets of values. One says the issue is lifestyle and identity, not economics, not the inequalities, and so forth and so on. And this is moving very fast. Now we come to the problem of Trump. And this is where the problem comes with Trump, and this is very key. The proposal that Trump's coterie of billionaires has for Trump to build infrastructure in the United States, they want to create a $1 trillion infrastructure fund, which is not big enough, but it's a $1 trillion infrastructure fund. And what they want to do is a small part of that is to be created by the government giving a tax credit to investors who invest in this bank. So you get most of your money in the form of a tax credit back. 80% of your money you put in back as a tax credit. Then this tax credit is how they fund it. And then they want to take that and leverage it into a $1 trillion loan guaranteed by the government. And they say we can do this because the interest rates are very low and money is cheap and so on and so forth. Now, the problem is that as soon as they start doing this, the interest rates are going to go up because the Federal Reserve has to raise the interest rates because this threatens the financial system. Number two, this plan is not clear in terms of two things. One is a coherent national strategy for the redevelopment of the United States and a coherent way of connecting that national development to the rest of the world. The Chinese have a coherent national strategy to develop China, but they also have a coherent strategy how that's going to connect to the rest of the world because they need the rest of the world as part of that development. Trump doesn't have that concept, I don't think. Or at least the people around him don't have that concept. They're not demonstrating that concept. So this is not going to work. However, in the meantime, you have also the financial problem with the international banks. You're going to have to implement Glass-Steagall. So these are the two areas that you're going to have to deal with. One is the Glass-Steagall issue. The other is the public credit question, the question of how you finance this, which is going to be a subject of one of the panels, one of the conference presentations. But all of that has to be vectored into a crash program for fusion and a space program to get the technology, to get the breakthroughs in science, to get the advancement in order to increase the energy flux density on which you can raise the economic platform Because otherwise, you're stuck in a lower energy level economic platform. You're not creating the wealth to sustain it. But if you do that, and that's the Chinese have made it very clear that that's their orientation. They're going to go in that direction. So the idea is that ultimately Trump is going to have to go to China. If he doesn't want the population rioting over the economic circumstances, he's going to have to go to China and get a partnership with China. And so he has to reestablish a normal relationship with Russia where they take care of the problem in the Middle East with the terrorists, and they clean that up and it goes back to normal, and then you can come in with a reconstruction program for the Middle East, and people that want to go back home can go back home. That'll relieve a lot of people, create a lot of jobs. That is one side of it. The other side of it is the internal economic situation in the United States is not going to be resolved at this advanced stage with the global financial situation without Glass-Steagall and without the United States partnering with China. If they don't partner with China, and they don't take advantage of this opportunity that China represents for the United States, then we're going to see the population very shortly becoming very disillusioned with the guy that they put in there, and then we go into another round of whatever. So I'm going to end it there.
You need a few short treatments, may not be warm.
Huh?
You need a couple of short treatments.
Yep, shock treatment.
Short, yeah.
And we took a very good reading of Obama's personality as well as who was running him, who was controlling him. And we said, this is going to be very bad. And at that point, we did something very provocative and very disturbing to most people. We put a Hitler mustache on Obama and put the poster out in our literature tables and what have you. And this did not go over very well with a lot of people who believed in hope and change. We had established ourselves with the Democratic Party in previous elections and in previous periods. We had friends in all of the state legislatures and Congress. We had people we talked to. They had a very high regard for us. And they lost that high regard for the LaRouche movement. We had a youth movement, which was quite significant in 2009. And most of the younger people couldn't deal with the fact that we were now pariahs in the society. We had made ourselves pariahs in the U.S. political establishment. We had gone to the extreme. We had become personas non gratis in the United States. And the people who loved our campaign to get rid of Dick Cheney, and our campaign to have hearings once the Congress convened in 2006, or can't remember exactly. They loved our campaign against the neocons and against the policies of the Republican government of George Bush, economic policies. Could not fathom and could not understand what had happened to us. We had fallen off the globe in their mind. We had gone stark raving mad. The whole financial system over to the international banks. And they can bail in. We fought, and we had congressmen and senators that were working with us, and they were lied to. They were lied to. And they were threatened. Their lives were threatened. But we continued to campaign for Glass-Steagall. And all the while, during this period, we became known as the dogmatic Glass-Steagall people and fighting Wall Street and Obama. And a lot of the people in Congress, especially the senators, said we can't touch it. We can't touch it. We don't have support. So we went to the state legislatures, and half the state legislatures passed resolutions in favor of Glass-Steagall. So we established ourselves as the Glass-Steagall people. And elements of the Democratic Party once again started working with us, but they were still freaked out about the mustache. They were still like very upset about the mustache. Then at the end of in September of 2011, you had, actually it's later, it was 2012. Was Benghazi 2012 or 2011? 2011.
No, 12.
12, okay. So in 2012, in 2010, Keisha ran again. This time, the Democratic Party mobilized to stop her from getting the nomination, and she won by a few votes with a full Democratic Party mobilization. So the Democratic Party was starting to get the feeling that they were not as loved as they were before. And then in the 2012 election in Texas, Keisha ran for U.S. Senate in the Democratic primaries, and she made it into the runoff. And they mobilized everything they had to defeat her in the runoff, which they did. So, and then the 2012 election was Romney had a potential to challenge Obama on Benghazi, and he backed down. Now, by 2013, the population in the hinterlands and in the suburbs and the...
Go.
Hello, today is November 16th. I'm Paul Glumas with the BC Movers chapter here in Vancouver. My purpose tonight is to give people a sense, first, of what has happened a week ago last Tuesday. Second, a sense as well as to why what happened has happened in terms of what is not visible. And third, to go into the all-out fight over policy that will now begin as a result of what has happened. Okay, and now, to understand what has happened in the United States, but also similarly in other nations of Europe, you have to go back almost 8 years after the inauguration of the President of Hope and Change. Okay, now a lot of people who voted for Trump voted for the President of Hope and Change because they looked at this individual and they said, this is different than Bush. The message is different. The look is different. And they voted for him. And he became president. And we had a feeling that it wasn't going to be all right. But we didn't. We went along with the transition. There was a transition period. And that transition period was hopeful. We had all kinds of indications that things might be different than under Bush Jr. and Dick Cheney. And then what happened was by April of 2009, we saw what was going to be happening, and we saw where this thing was going to go. Working class populations, they had reached a point where they were getting very angry. People's children were coming back from Afghanistan, from Iraq, time and time again. People were being broken. The word was getting out that in that layer that Obama was backing the Islamic fundamental Islamic terrorists, and things started to shift. So things reached a certain boil around 2013 going into 2014. We would go out in the street. Now the mustache sign was very popular. Everywhere we went, whether you were, but not in the well-educated urban areas where people were better off, but in the suburbs and in the there's an older guy who punched out one of our people because of the mustache sign saying that, you know, he's from, you know, he's Jewish and he was from Eastern Europe. And the media made a big case about this guy, older guy, punching a woman out and supporting him in doing this. But by now, he was coming up to our table saying, I agree with you now. I see what you were saying. I'm sorry I punched you guys. I'm sorry I did that. I apologize. But now I see what you're saying. Now I understand what you're saying. Okay. So now, as we go into the 2014 election, and this is very important, and I was out in the streets, I was out in the hinterlands, I was out in the suburbs, okay? The Republican Party decided to organize victory in the House and Senate. And in all their fundraising operations, they promised the population that they would take care of the issue of Obama. They would have hearings and so forth and so on. They would get to the root of the criminality and around Benghazi and so forth and so on. And they managed to win enough seats to go into the Senate and the House. But the reason they were able to do that was they went after Obama.
Yeah.
So what happened? And as a result, we had, I was out on the streets with the mustache sign. And people were not happy with us. And people that I knew, people in the Democratic Party that I worked with were just like, they couldn't believe we were doing this. And we told them why we were doing it. We told them what Obama was. We told them how he intended to use Obamacare to start culling the elderly and so forth and so on, and letting the insurance companies rich everybody up. We told them he was going to expand the wars. We told them who we worked for, and they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it. Oh, no, he's only doing what he's being told by the military-industrial complex. They couldn't see that he, as president, was what he was. And so it got worse because as people began to see that we were right, they got more hysterical towards us, especially in the Democratic and the more liberal areas of the country. And then in 2010, a year later, Keisha Rogers of Texas ran as a congressional candidate in a Democratic congressional primary as a Democrat with the Impeach Obama program and all the other positive programs that we had. And it was a Republican, primarily Republican congressional district, but it had a decent amount of Democrats. And she had opponents in the Democratic Party who were running, and she won the primary.
Wow.
And that caused a lot of people to get very upset because she won the primary because increasingly people were starting to get a picture of what Obama was doing. And then in 2011, we had the whole fight around Glass-Steagall in the Congress. And Obama lied and said, we're doing Glass-Steagall. No, you're turning the